welcome to All Rise. This is Abdu Murray. I'm Derek Caldwell, and we're here today to continue on our series answering your questions. Remember, you asked for it, and now you're getting it. You might regret asking for it, but here we are.
Yeah.
And we're going pretty deep. Some of these are going to be very in-depth answers.
Yeah.
Which is lovely because we celebrated the birthday of someone today who loves our in-depth podcast.
Oh, yeah. She goes on and on about how much she loves how long and detailed our podcasts are. She just can't get enough of the detail.
Yeah.
We just got back from lunch celebrating the birthday of two dear people who are on our team. One of the people who, sarcastically, we say she loves our long-form content. She's not big on detail. She does like the answers. But is Mervat, who is our ministry coordinator, wonderful person. And, of course, Joe Mastro, who is just another wonderful person who we love dearly, who works on the team as well. So by the time this airs, it'll have been well past Mervat's birthday and a little bit past Joe's, I believe, or maybe not. Anyway, we're very grateful for those two. And we are both full of crepe.
Yes.
What did I say?
Correct.
Okay, great.
You got it right. Yeah, because now there are going to be some people in the comments that say, yes, we've been saying that for years. Two idiots today.
Oh, that's right. That's that. Yeah.
Callback. But
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. And it was so good. And these were giant crepes.
Yeah.
And it made me think of, we were talking about it in the car. I believe isn't it Talladega Nights where Ricky Bobby is forced to say that, like, so Sacha Baron Cohen's character is trying to get him to say that crepes are better than pancakes.
Yeah.
And he won't. So
Yeah.
he's like, you could even say, you could say thin pancake.
Yeah.
And John C. Reilly's like, that's actually pretty fair. He's like, Will Ferrell's like, okay, I'm going to do it. Ricky Bobby, I'm going to do it. No, I would know.
Yeah.
And he doesn't do it. Anyway.
They were pretty good.
That's where I learned about
I got to
grapes.
say, though, before we get into the deep stuff, is that
I thought
if
we
you're
already had, but go ahead.
well, if you're gonna pick a place that is incredibly unmanly, a crepe store, a crepe shop is the place you'd go. That's not manly. However, I had a crepe full of stuff like this.
These crepes were pretty.
Yeah.
So
All right. Shout out to our good friends
Yeah.
at the crepe shop. You did a great job. Thank you.
European.
Taste of Europe.
Taste of Europe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, did we get sponsorship for that?
I don't know.
Well, anyway, we liked you. We liked you.
Great job.
Yeah.
But today, okay, how do I transition to this one?
Yeah. We do want to get serious, though. We do want to get serious
Yeah.
because we have the privilege.
Yeah.
And it is a privilege, by the way, for people to submit questions to us.
Sure.
As I think about the sobering responsibility there is to have some fun, be a little lighthearted about things, because there's room for that. But there are some serious questions that we're given, and this is a sobering responsibility we've been given to answer some of these questions to the best of our ability, the best of our knowledge, based on not only our understanding of the Scripture and Christian faith, but also our personal experience. So it is a joy to do so and a pleasure to do so, considering it is a privilege to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is one of those ones that, it is, we do have the privilege of answering it because this first one especially, clearly I know the story behind the question. You won't necessarily get into all those details, but you have built trust with someone enough where they're like, okay, I'm ready to be vulnerable. Here's the thing that happened. I would like your help answering it. And that's what a lot of times in all the Q&As, it's someone saying, here's something I'm struggling with. And so when they ask it, they're really putting themselves out in the open for that. And so this question, this first one that we're going to respond to is why do young people die? And as I said, this is asked by someone, a mother whose son passed away, and when he was, he was in his last year of high school in a car accident. So I know that. So sometimes you don't always know the story, though.
Yeah.
And why do young people die? Could be referring to a 5-year-old with cancer, some violent, horrific terrorist attack. I mean, it could be so many different things.
There's so many contexts to this kind of a thing. Why do young people die? And it does reveal something about the questioner. They've either known someone who is struggling with this because they've lost someone young in their life, or they themselves have lost someone young in their life. And in either instance, the person asking the question is asking something deep and serious. And it reveals something about the heart of the person who's asking. Even if you're asking on someone else's behalf, it's because you care deeply about this. And this goes back to, before we get into the meat of the answer, this goes back to something that we try to do and strive for over and over again. And I hope you guys are getting this too, whether you're a Christian or you're not, and many of you are not. Answer the person, not the question, whenever you can. So because we're answering them from this perspective, you know the story. We can answer this particular question with that in mind. But sometimes when someone is asked this sort of in a vacuum, why do young people die? You can still answer the person because you know that they care about someone who either is suffering through this kind of loss or they themselves have suffered through it. So handle these kind of questions with as much dignity and tact as you possibly can because you're answering a person, not a question. So there's a lot of different contexts to this kind of thing. Natural disasters, someone's ripped from you suddenly because of a disaster or an accident, or slowly because of an illness. There's a million reasons why this might happen. But one of the things that I think we have to be careful about as we approach this as meaningfully as we can is to understand it is in the context of a why question. Now, there's two things about why questions that I want to just talk about really briefly when it becomes a why question relative to God. We'll ask you three things, but the first thing I want to say is that when we answer why questions, we have to be very careful because we're, as limited, finite human beings, if God exists, we're being asked to crawl inside the mind of the infinite and pull out the needle in the infinite haystack, as it were, and say, this is the reason why this particular instance of suffering was allowed to happen, or why this particular death was allowed to happen. And I would be arrogant if I told you I could do that. I could just conjure it up right now and even give you a general principle that might satisfy the soul. So I want to be careful about that. Why questions can sometimes lead to a false sense of certainty if I give you an answer of some kind, because I'm never going to answer why this particular instance might have happened. But the second thing about why questions that I think is equally important is that not only are we asking ourselves a big question on a speculation issue, but there is a sense in which a why question has the supposition that there is at least some kind of an answer. But before I get there, this is the real issue I wanted to, before I hand it over to you. What is interesting to me is the context of why questions is usually in the form of loss or suffering. I've said it before from the stage and many different times, and I think it's true. People don't drop to their knees, look up at the heavens, and ask purpose-driven why questions when good things happen. You know, if you get a sudden inheritance from an uncle you didn't know you had, or you win the money ball or whatever it's called, and you get these sort of fortunes that happen, you don't drop to your knees and say, why God, why would you let this happen? You don't do that. Pain and suffering because of loss is often the thing that drives us to ask deep, meaning questions. And that to me is a signal. The fact that you ask a why question when something bad happens, when there's a loss, is a signal about the transcendent value of the thing you lost, in distinction to the transcendent value of the thing you gained. Like, we tend not to think of these things as transcendent and ask big purpose why questions until something bad happens. So loss has a way of giving us a hint to, this is not the way it was supposed to be. The loss of something signals to us this is not the way it was supposed to be. The adding of things is more like a fortuitous thing almost. It is a blessing, I believe, but oftentimes we don't think of it that way where we ask big why questions. So those are the two things I would point out at first, is that it's dangerous to over-speculate on why questions. And second, why questions are great in this sense because they also get us to ask big, deep, meaning questions.
Yeah, and I think, there is this tendency also, back to the kind of one of the earlier points you just made there. There's this tendency for apologists and Christians, they want to sort of have an answer to the why question.
Yeah.
And there are all these things that they call theodicies, which essentially, how do you make sense of God in light of the suffering world? It's almost this defense of God in the light of suffering. So we come up with these different theodicies, and they've got all these different names, the soul-making theodicy, the greater good theodicies, things like that. Open theism is a type of theodicy.
Yeah.
And there's all these things, but one of the ones that I was really, I think, influenced by to a degree was the one referred to as skeptical theism, which Nicholas Wolterstorff, Stephen Weikstra, Wolterstorff, who wrote Lament for a Son, which is
terrific book,
great book for someone going through something like this. And they essentially, to that point, even if you look in the scripture, we're not given the sort of blanket response to here's exactly, in one sense you are. The fall is why bad things happen. The fall of humanity, sin entering the world.
Yeah.
But you're not given, even there, one standard answer for each individual instance of evil that takes place. You're given, if you look at the book of Job, if you look at, why the man was born blind, you look at the Tower of Siloam, all these things they're either not answered or they're given different answers. And there's other instances within the scriptures as well, just to show that, we should have, like you mentioned, we should have this, what they call epistemic humility.
Yeah.
That we are not at the vantage point to see everything that's going on, to see all the intricacies. And so we should be very careful. We should be skeptical of whether we can even know, without it being directly revealed to us, why one thing happened here and one thing happened there, especially when it comes to evil, especially in suffering, and especially when it's dealing with someone who is going through the suffering after the fact of having lost someone.
Yeah. Well, and I once heard William Lane Craig say something like this a while back, is that if God gave you the answers to every why question you ever had, especially including about suffering on this side of heaven, the world would be practically haunted, because all we'd be getting is answers as to why things happened, both large scale in terms of the tragedy, but also small scale. Like if he answers you on the big stuff, why not also on the small stuff? Why did he let you stub your toe in the basement when you were home alone and no one was there, and that pain couldn't have possibly affected some outcome beyond your house or whatever it is? If he gave you an answer all the time, the world would be haunted. Plus, are we in the position to even know, again, that epistemic humility, that skeptical theism, are we even in a position to understand, even if the answer was given? Would a limited mind be able to comprehend the immensity of an answer like this, or would we go mad from the complexity of the scenario you'd have to know in order to see, oh, that's how it fits into the story? There's a million things we just don't know.
And would it comfort you?
Yeah, and would it comfort us? Would knowing why say, okay, good, I'm good?
Oh,
no, you
great.
still have the loss.
Yeah.
They're still gone.
Yeah.
Knowing that it fits into some grand plan in specific may comfort you on the other side of heaven when you're reunited with that loved one, but it's unlikely to fill a void on this side of heaven all by itself. And I look at someone like a Julian Baggini, who I thought, a couple of quotes from Julian Baggini, but one in particular is such an honest answer from an atheist perspective. And he says, atheists have to live with the knowledge that there is no salvation, no redemption, no second chances. Lives can go terribly wrong in ways that can never be put right. Can you really tell the parents who lost their child to a suicide after years of depression that they should stop worrying and enjoy life? Now, he's actually right there. He's actually poking fun at the billboards or the bus billboards that were on the side of the double-decker buses that the British Humanist Association had put up, where it said, there's probably no God. Now stop worrying and enjoy your life. And Baggini is saying, can you really tell someone who has lost a child to suicide, there's probably no God. Now stop worrying and enjoy your life? They've incurred this incredible loss for which there is no redemption. So the point here is that Baggini's answer is so powerful because it gives us two things. One, it shows us in atheism there is no why. If this is all just matter plus time plus chance and random collocations of atoms bumping into each other, they bump into each other a certain way, and there's no why. There just is. So the question couldn't even be asked with any credible basis on a purely naturalistic framework. And of course, it doesn't provide any comfort whatsoever, because you have to live with this and realize there is no meaning to that death, except for this sort of personalized, subjective, possibly even just conjured up, manufactured meaning to someone's life or death. Right. But Christians can ask the question. You look at Proverbs and you find Solomon asking questions like this. You look at Ecclesiastes and you find Solomon asking questions about what is the meaning of all this? Everything seems to just die. Human beings seem to die like animals. What is their lot? But buried in the question and the prose of that verse of Scripture, Solomon is basically saying, but I'm asking a why question because I'm not an animal and because I have a God to whom I can go. A blind, pitiless, indifferent universe is blind, pitiless, indifferent, and therefore can't give you an answer because it has no answer. But a God who can make that universe can provide you an answer, which is why Lewis asked that question, makes that statement where he says, I know, Lord, why you utter no answer. You yourself are the answer. Before your face, questions die away. What other answer would suffice other than the person of God himself? Which is why the book of Job ends the way it does. It doesn't end with God ever giving Job an answer except for his presence. And that's why Job says, I heard of you, but now I see you. Yeah. And that is satisfactory enough for Job to understand that there is a greater plan here from this God who is infinitely greater than Job himself. So death and loss are always terrible, especially when there's someone young. And the reason we ask these questions is oftentimes it is because of the youth of the person who's lost. But all loss is terrible. All loss is terrible. And I think that the reason that all loss is terrible, and I lost my dad very recently. He was ripped away from us. My dad was 72 when he was murdered in 2024. And it's a sudden loss. I wasn't even in the country when it happened, and I had to fly right back, and it's awful. But he was older, had a life to live. Does that make it any less valuable than someone who is young? But I appreciate why, as a father of three, why there would be an acuteness to the loss because of the youth. I think there's more to it than just someone passed away.
Well, when we're sort of used to the way, the general way of things, I guess, is that people get old and then they die, and you've come to expect it, even though it's still hard. Whereas obviously the younger person is, they had all this stuff ahead of them. They never got to get married. They never got to have kids. They never got to, he never got to walk his daughter down the aisle. All these milestones that we know they're missing, that they're gone like everyone else, but they're gone too soon. As if the people who died when they were older were not gone too soon. Yeah. Like if you're 99, you're not gone too soon. Of course, that brings up the question of, were we meant to die or were we not? But the point, you brought up your father, and I was thinking too about my own grandmother and when she passed away. And I remember being in the hospital, and the nurse came to us. She'd had a heart attack. The nurse came to us and said, she passed away peacefully. And I remember in that moment, and I was very close to my grandparents, and just thinking, like, I don't think that's true. I mean, I know what she meant, and we were thankful that my grandmother was out of it and not in pain at that very moment. It wasn't a suffering death necessarily, other than that maybe her last, conscious moments may not have been all that happy. May have been kind of worrisome for her, I'm certain. But to pass away peacefully, but passing away, dying, isn't peaceful in and of itself, because it's not the way it was meant to be.
Yeah, when I was seeking counseling after my father's murder, the guy I was seeing as a counselor through this whole thing, he pointed out, is like, look, this grieving process, you go through it, everyone goes through it differently, and we go through the various cycles in various different ways because death is not the way it was supposed to be. Death is not a natural part of life. You hear this all the time in the media. Death is simply another natural part of life. Well, it's not. If there's no purpose in this whole thing, then why are we so upset about it?
Yeah.
And we feel the loss of someone older and someone younger in acute ways. I'm never going to get over my father's murder. It's never going to happen. And in some ways it shouldn't, because if they meant something, I will always feel something by their loss. Death is not a natural part of life, because what is natural is what God had intended for it to be. Right. And it was not intended to be this way, which is exactly why one of the most famous verses of the Bible, and definitely one of the shortest, is Jesus wept at the tomb of Lazarus, a man who had just died, one of his friends who had just died, and Jesus was about to raise him from the dead. Jesus doesn't weep because Lazarus is lost to us forever. Jesus weeps because this is not how it was intended to be. But because of God's sovereignty, he allows human free will and allows the fall to happen for a redemptive plan. But that doesn't make it any less tragic and any less unnatural for people to die. So I think that that puts a value on human life, and it gives death almost like a punctuation, like an exclamation point at the end of that word death, because it's not the way it was supposed to be.
Right, and it's like a capital D death enemy. This is an enemy of God in a sense, and an enemy of life,
which he's dealt with.
And it reminds me a little bit too of, just kind of an aside, I was taking a class from a Lutheran seminary at one point, and they were talking about Luther's perspective on kind of similar to this. He said, it was even the idea of like Luther wouldn't have been comfortable with people saying, like, when someone messes up or sins or whatever, saying, oh, that's just human nature. It's like, no, that's not human nature. That's fallen humanity. Human nature looks like what Christ looked like when he lived as a mere human. He was not actually a mere human, obviously, but lived that way while on earth. Human nature is meant to be good and reflect God in all ways.
What you just said is so profound, I got to say, from the Christian perspective, if I can just pause for a moment, only because the incarnation speaks so much about so many things. Jesus, we're merely human. Jesus is fully human, but he's also fully divine.
Right.
So I love what you said, because we get to because if we want to reflect what it really means to have human nature, there it is, on display as it should be. So you can form your humanness to that humanness. We're never going to get there because we're not perfect, but that's what we're striving towards and what we're being sanctified toward. But also, because you want to know what it means to be made in God's image, Christ is the image of the invisible God, the radiance of his glory and his likeness. Yeah. So we see two things in there at the same time, which tells us why death is so alien to what it means to be human. Actually, it's alien to the whole enterprise, which is why we get such heartfelt questions that can last decades, even after you get the answer. That why is still going to last. I still ask the why. My dad died a year ago. I keep asking the why question, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, because this is an alien concept.
Yeah. And now it's interesting, though, when we, just to dive in a bit to the biblical text, we do see something happening to death in light of what Christ did, in light of the incarnation, him coming, living a life, dying, being resurrected, and ascending into heaven.
And death being the enemy.
And as we say in my church, trampling down death by death, the actual death, killing death by dying. This really sort of paradoxical way of framing this, but and so when we learn about death, basically what we've been saying, you look at Romans 5, it's talking about sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin. And in this way, death came to all people because all sinned. So death touches all of us now because we're all sinners.
Yeah.
And
the one man, by the way, is Adam.
Adam, yeah. Yes, thank you for saying that, yeah. Just as sin entered the world through Adam, through the fall that we mentioned earlier. And then Hebrews 2, it talks about verses 14 through 15, since the children have flesh and blood, Christ too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is the devil. The devil holds the power of death. And free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. So there's a fear of death, a slavery to the fear of death, which causes sin. So sin causes death, death causes sin, and on it goes.
Yeah.
Christ breaks that, and he mentions that in Hebrews 2, and so that then death sort of turns into something else in the eyes of God and in the people of God.
And that's why you get this beautiful passage where the Bible says in Psalm 116, verse 15, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his faithful servants. Or another passage, another way, is one of his saints, which is somebody who is sanctified, who is a follower of God.
And that's technical, and that's also that is sort of obviously pre-Christ, and we're talking about Christ. But it is seeing this. There's already something going on about with the way God is dealing with people and what death will mean when his son comes.
And of course, the Psalms are full of messianic prophecies that talk about the deliverance of humanity from death from a messianic figure who will take care of it for us. So it makes perfect sense that you're going to see death transformed into almost this precious thing that God sees, because it's going to be dealt with in a beautiful way at some point. And in John chapter 14, verses 1 to 3, you see that do not let your hearts be troubled. Jesus is talking to his disciples on the eve, by the way, of his death. Right before he's about to undergo death and unspeakable violence himself. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may also be where I am. So there's a coming redemption, and that the death is going to happen, but it's going to work out life. Death will trample death, which is why in the Passion of the Christ, at the end of this movie, when you see this seductive devil figure sort of stalking about while Jesus is about to undergo this whole dying on the cross thing, you almost get the impression, you get the impression that the devil's trying to convince Jesus not to do it, because he knows what's going to happen when you die on the cross for their sins. They will be saved of those sins, and I don't want it. I want death to be this ugly, horrible thing, and you're going to turn it into something that has no power over human beings, which is why when Jesus finally dies on that cross in the movie, the devil sort of writhes about in this horrible shriek, because it's over. He just got defeated, and there'll be the consummation of his defeat to come. And there's so much more to speak of, and the scriptures are many and numerous, from Romans chapter 6 and Philippians chapter 1. In Romans chapter 6, where just as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, we too may live a new life. Not only do we have a sense of purpose in this life, but also there's a life and a resurrection to come. And right now in this life, to live as Christ is to act like Christ, is to be self-sacrificial, and to die is gain. Death has no power over the believer anymore, because it is to be with Jesus. So there's a whole sense of that. So if you're a Christian and you're listening to this, it's important to remember that death becomes a doorway, though it was not meant the way it was meant to be. Because sin enters the world, God actually uses that to transform death into something where it can be gain for those who are in Jesus. Hey, we'll get back to the show in just a second, but right now I wanted to tell you about my new book, Fake ID, How AI and Identity Ideology Are Collapsing Reality and What to Do About It. It's available for pre-order now. Now, to tell you about the book, here's a short trailer. Something is deeply wrong, and we can all feel it. Culture tells us we're nothing but machines. It also tells us we're gods who can reshape reality by sheer will. Both can't be true, so it creates a kind of cultural schizophrenia, where we can no longer tell what's authentic from what's artificial, and it's collapsing reality itself. But we're not machines to upgrade. We're not gods whose bodies are playthings or prisons. What we are is something the world is forgetting, but desperately needs to remember. Because only the truth about what we are can restore our sense of what's real. Okay, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, and so this, you really see this in a way that you don't really see it so much today.
Mm-hmm.
But in the early church, this reality of, I mean, they really accepted that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you see it in some like exceptional people today, but the idea of like, especially in parts of the world where martyrdom is still a real possibility.
Yeah.
It's almost, you know, when you
Think
become
of Nigeria right now,
yeah,
for example.
exactly. And when you're sort of a comfortable Christian, you cling to life.
Mm-hmm.
When you have those things taken away, you sort of see what's real and what is the most important thing. And so in the early church, this was happening. Obviously, they were heavily persecuted at various times. And you see this real strength of character in the face of death. I mean, they're saying, wow, isn't this wonderful that we're going to get to like suffer like Jesus did.
Mm-hmm.
Paul says things like this.
Yeah.
Isn't this great?
Yeah.
What a joy that I'll
For it
get to
has been
share in the
granted
sufferings.
to you to suffer for
Right.
his name's sake. That word granted is actually more akin to lavishly given to you. Mm-hmm. You're like, what? How is that? Thank you, but no thank you?
Yeah.
You know, so there is a different perspective on this whole thing.
And so I just wanted to point out a couple of the people who early on kind of embodied this in their approach. So there's Ignatius of Antioch, who's considered one of these apostolic fathers of first generation after the apostles. He's being taken to Rome to and he'll be torn apart by wild beasts. He knows that's coming because he is a follower of Christ and a vocal follower of Christ and a leader in the early church. And so he's writing a letter to the Romans, and he's essentially saying, look, I'm going to be coming there. I'm in chains. They're going to throw me to wild beasts. And he'll say things, essentially he's saying, I beseech you, this is a direct quote, I beseech you not to indulge your benevolence at the wrong time. Please let me be thrown to the wild beasts. Through them I can reach God. I am God's wheat. I am ground by the teeth of the wild beasts that I might end up as the pure bread of Christ. And he'll say, my search is for him who died for us. My love is for him who rose for our salvation. The pangs of new birth are upon me. Forgive me, brethren. Do not prevent this new life. And he'll even talk about, he'll say like, don't desire that I perish. And by perish, he doesn't mean die. He means be allowed to live and, you know, enjoy the creature comforts and all of these things.
Yeah.
He's saying, please don't interrupt this new life. They want to do this. He wants to be this witness for Christ and
Wow.
his power and life. And Irenaeus of Lyon said, who would also end up being martyred, he explicitly said, sorry, I want to go back one more. And Ignatius, one of the last things he said, one final warning to those who would wish to rescue him from martyrdom, is he said, do not let your lips be for Jesus Christ and your heart for the world.
Oh.
And that was his whole thing. And I wonder, how many compromises have we made because our heart is for the world? And that's a challenge for all of us. It's a challenge daily for everything we do. There's so many compromises we make. Another one, Irenaeus of Lyon, who was also martyred, he said, the business of a Christian is nothing else but to be ever preparing for death. And so it's the idea of, you know, lose your life so that you can find it. And then once you've found it, don't start clinging to the old things again. That the way to life is through exactly what Christ did, is to sort of die to yourself. Don't, you know, just because you are now this prince, because you've been accepted in the household of God, you don't live like that. You actually live bearing your cross, and that's the narrow way that Christ talks about. The compromises we make and everything like that, that is the wide way. That's the easy way. And so they're saying, that's why he's saying, being ever preparing for death. Stop being afraid of it, in one sense, because that will be the thing that derails you by not accepting that. And the very last one, obviously, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, his very last words on earth that we know of, other than whatever he may have said in the interrogation that took place in the Nazi prison camp that he was eventually killed in, where to his friend, when he was called out, he said, "This is the end, for me, the beginning of life." So that's what Christ does to death, is, you accept that actually you're about to be more alive than you've ever been before. And of course, it's not completely fulfilled until the resurrection.
Right.
But it's still this beautiful thing that's going on and I think that's why I get inspiration from these people, because they show me like that's the way to live. As someone who has a lot of fear of death and has historically had a lot of fear of death, this is the type of thing that that we all need to remember.
Well, there's also this step graduation thing. It's like, it's not that this isn't life. We're alive, and life is good, it's beautiful, and it's a blessing.
Exactly.
But when, to live is Christ and to die is gain, to be absent from the body is present with the Lord. And, between the two, I do not know, Paul says, which to choose, because I stay here for your purposes.
Yeah.
I live for your purposes, so I can serve you, human beings. Life is self-sacrificial, but to die, an act of self-sacrifice, becomes gain because then you're with the Lord, who gave himself for you in self-sacrifice. Yeah. So you have life, then you have this doorway that death has now become, even though it's unnatural, it's been transformed to a better life than we have hitherto known. And then when our bodies are united with our spirits, there's this consummation, and then yet another level of life that is even greater because now it's all fulfilled. So death, it does lead to something for everyone in a way that is a graduated ecstasies of experience. Is that to die is gain, but then to be resurrected from the death is even greater gain. Yeah. Not because you lose that presence with Christ, because you're actually consummated with what you were supposed to be, which is body and soul. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think when King David's son, just to wrap up this question here, when King David's son died, David was grieving up to that point. And as soon as his son died, the people, I think the servants, were surprised that David immediately stopped the grieving process. And they asked him why, and he said, well, now he can't come to me, but one day I'll go to him. And so that is a level of peace that I think you can offer in this situation with this particular question, because I know who asked it. But it's interesting that even there was a time where I was talking about this in a previous ministry I worked at, and there was someone who really objected to that when I was writing an article about it. Really objected to that sort of point of this great reunion coming up. And the issue was that, she had a young son, but he was still alive. He had not passed away. And so to her, it was very unsatisfactory. And it made sense. Yeah. And I remember just realizing, again, that's another thing to keep in mind when we were talking about the context before, because that, the person who asked this question is now, well over, it's been 30 years, longer than 30 years since her son passed away. She's ready for the reunion. The pain is still there, but it has, there's now a level of acceptance. He's not coming back, but one day I'll go to him. Yeah. And that's the thing that drives her versus someone who has not experienced that, or maybe freshly experienced it, and it's not going to be as comforting. Yeah. So that's just one of those, like, kind of this example that really spoke to me of like, oh wow, I didn't even think of it like that, and we had a great conversation about it.
Well, and that's the wonder of these kinds of things, is that we have various episodes where we talk about theodicies, and I've talked about where is God in all the suffering, and how can we make sense of a universe that is full of evil and suffering, yet it's also created by a God who is all good and all powerful. So there's different places you can go to for that specific response on this. And so we're not necessarily answering the theodicy question as we started out, you pointed out in the beginning. I think this is really important, is that recognizing when someone has experienced loss, as many of us have, is that an answer doesn't provide comfort in a particular moment of time until that person is ready to receive that comfort. So be discerning. In fact, if someone were to ask the question, why did God? And let's say it's fresh and it's raw and it happened days ago or hours ago, don't provide an answer at that particular moment in terms of like, well, God transforms death into life. And they're not interested in hearing that, and just provide no comfort. You have two reasons to answer this question. Probably many reasons, but there's two reasons to hear this question and think of a response. One response is, okay, is it time now? Are we ready to talk about the mystery of life and death, and can we find a response, especially when someone young dies? Because we're at a point where that answer will matter. The second response is probably the first one you should give, especially if it's raw and fresh, which is no response at all. Just grieve with those who grieve and mourn with those who mourn, and be quiet. Yeah. Don't try to give them an answer. Just let it be the awful thing that it is, and acknowledge its awfulness, and be in solidarity with someone who's going through that. And I think if you take the first approach, you'll know when you take that approach of being silent. First, you might know when to speak because the other person will let you know when it's the time to speak. Yeah. And you'll do them a service. And maybe if you're going through it, maybe you'll do yourself the service of not necessarily getting an answer, as opposed to just being able to ask the why question and realize that there will be something, but you're not going to get it now. And it won't comfort you now anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good advice. I've found, too, a lot of the times the quick answers we give are typically to make us feel more comfortable around the person who's making us uncomfortable with their own grieving, and we're being faced with it, but it's like a step removed, so we're okay with the sort of pat answer. The what do they call that? I'm trying to think of that word.
A canned response.
But there's another anyway.
Cliche.
Cliched answer. Yeah.
Well, can I just say this though, along those lines, and this is just something. This is practical advice, because it worked for me. It worked on me, I should say. When my dad died, it was a horrible shock because of the way he was taken from us, and I was very far away. I got on the plane to fly back home, and the lead flight attendant. The whole crew knew the story because there had to be an arrangement where I flew back home immediately, and the whole crew was aware of it, at least as far as I could tell. The lead flight attendant knelt down next to me after making sure I had everything I needed for a very long flight home. And he didn't ask me, how are you? He didn't say, God works in mysterious ways. He didn't give me any of that. He asked me a question, and his question was, would you mind telling me your favorite memory of your dad? And so in that one statement, he acknowledged the awfulness of the situation, but he also acknowledged the preciousness of my father on a way that almost so he understands there's an objective reality to the preciousness of life. So if you're going to say anything and try to fill the discomfort with something, ask that person to share a beautiful memory of the one they've lost.
All right. Well, it's me, Derek, from the future. You can tell I've got my 2026 haircut. And as we thought, this episode went a little long. So we're cutting it up for your sanity. And we'll be back with part 2 of this episode in 2 weeks. Until then, the defense rests.